Bookmark. Rebecca Grossman. On the evening of September 29, 2020, Westlake Village, California, looked like any other quiet suburban community. The sun had just set, and families were walking home from the park. In that stillness, 11-year-old Marcus Skander and his 8-year-old brother Jacob were crossing a marked crosswalk with their mother nearby. They were holding hands, just steps away from safety. Then came the sound that would haunt this neighborhood forever. The roar of a white Mercedes-Benz SUV, accelerating far above the 45-mile-per-hour limit. Witnesses later said the vehicle was flying down the road at 81 miles per hour, tailing another car so closely that it looked more like a chase than an evening drive. In a split second, that SUV struck the boys with such force that Mark's body was thrown over 250 feet. Jacob was carried nearly 50. Both children died before help could arrive. The driver was Rebecca Grossman, a wealthy socialite, philanthropist, and co-founder of the Grossman Burn Foundation. Known for attending high-end charity events and moving in elite circles, she had built a reputation of prestige and privilege. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The lives of 2 young boys were gone, and she was behind the wheel. Investigators would later uncover disturbing details about her behavior that night. Grossman had been drinking earlier in the evening and had also taken Valium. Though her blood alcohol level tested just under the legal limit, prosecutors argued she was impaired. She wasn't driving alone either. Following close ahead of her was Scott Erickson, a former Major League Baseball pitcher, and her then lover. Data from the Mercedes black box showed that Grossman never braked in time. Even worse, after striking the children, she did not stop at once to render aid. Instead, her car continued until its automated emergency system forced it to shut down. In the days that followed, Grossman tried to deflect responsibility. She claimed she hadn't seen the boys. She suggested another car might have struck them first. At one point, she even tried to shift blame onto Erickson, saying his vehicle was involved. But the evidence told the truth. Cell tower pings, surveillance cameras, eyewitness testimony, and her own vehicle's data placed her squarely at the scene and behind the wheel. What made this case even more shocking was her conduct after the crash. Prosecutors accused her of trying to manipulate witnesses and even reaching out to jurors during the trial, behavior that nearly derailed the proceedings. In the courtroom, they described her as evasive, entitled, and unwilling to accept accountability. On February 23, 2024, after years of delay, a Los Angeles jury convicted Rebecca Grossman of 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter with gross negligence, and hit-and-run causing death. At sentencing, the judge handed down 15 years to life in prison, with an additional 3 years for fleeing the scene, to be served concurrently. But the most powerful moment did not come from the verdict. It came from the grieving mother, Nancy Iskander, who stood in court and faced the woman who had taken her children. Her words pierced the silence. "You didn't just kill my children. You tried to erase them with lies." Rebecca Grossman now lives behind bars in a California state prison. She went from a mansion in Hidden Hills to a concrete cell surrounded by razor wire. If parole is ever granted, the earliest she could walk free is in the 2030s. Though for the Iskander family, the thought of her release is almost unbearable. 2 boys who should have grown up to chase their dreams instead had their lives ended in a crosswalk by a woman who thought the rules did not apply to her. And now, the woman who once moved effortlessly through charity galas and country clubs will spend years confronting the reality of what she took away. 2. Amy Preasmyer. In the summer of 1997, 21-year-old Ricky Cowles Jr. was laying the foundation for his future. He was an electrician, hardworking and dependable, known by his friends as quiet, kind, and good with his hands. He wasn't just wiring circuits, he was building relationships, fixing problems for others, and beginning to dream of raising a family. He thought he had that family already. His girlfriend, Amy Preasmyer, was 16 years old and pregnant with his child. Ricky saw responsibility. He saw love. He saw a chance to build something meaningful. But Amy saw something else entirely. Instead of embracing the life they had created together, she viewed Ricky as an obstacle. She didn't want the weight of a relationship, didn't want the responsibilities of family, and she decided the only way out was murder. On August 12, 1997, Ricky was found inside his Lancaster, California apartment. He had been savagely beaten with a claw hammer, then shot in the head at point-blank range. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but his injuries were too severe. 3 days later, he was pronounced dead. The person who dialed 911? Amy herself, trembling, crying, pretending she had just walked in on the scene. At first, detectives were baffled. There was no forced entry, nothing stolen, and Ricky had no enemies. He was just a young man with his entire life ahead of him, cut down without reason. The case went cold. For 2 years, Ricky's family lived without answers. Then came the break. In 1999, a man named Billy Hoffman began bragging that he had killed someone for money. Word got back to police. When they brought Hoffman in, the truth spilled out. He said Amy Preasmyer had hired him to kill her boyfriend. She hadn't acted alone. Her friend Jennifer Kellogg had helped set it up, and another accomplice provided the weapon. The motive was chilling in its simplicity. Amy didn't want Ricky in her life anymore. She didn't want the responsibilities that came with him or with their child. Instead of leaving, instead of talking, she orchestrated his death. The details of the murder were cold and calculated. Amy made sure Ricky would be home that night, unsuspecting. Jennifer drove Hoffman to the apartment. Hoffman entered, bludgeoned Ricky with the hammer, and fired the shot that ended his life. Hours later, Amy arrived, playing the role of the devastated girlfriend. Her performance was convincing enough to fool nearly everyone for years. It wasn't until Hoffman confessed that the facade crumbled. Prosecutors built their case around his testimony, corroborated by recorded jailhouse conversations and even Amy's own words, caught on tape when she thought no one was listening. At one point, she told a friend, "If Hoffman doesn't testify, they don't have a case against me." In 2005, nearly 8 years after Ricky's death, Amy was finally arrested. Her trial began in 2007, and in 2008, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. The judge sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole. Amy was just a teenager when she orchestrated the crime, but her age did not lessen the brutality of her choices. She was sent to the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, where she remains today. Her parole eligibility is listed for 2025, but given the nature of the case, release seems almost unthinkable. For Ricky's family, the sentence could never match the loss. Their son, brother, and friend was stolen from them in a moment of senseless betrayal. And the child Amy was carrying, Ricky's child, grew up without a father. Not because of illness, not because of an accident, but because his own mother decided that murder was easier than honesty. This was not just a killing. It was the ultimate betrayal. A young man trying to do the right thing, destroyed by the very person he trusted most. And for that betrayal, Amy Preasmyer traded her freedom for a prison cell, leaving behind a life of wasted potential and a legacy of pain. 3. Leslie Van Houten. In the 1960s, she looked like the kind of girl who could have lived an ordinary suburban life. Leslie Van Houten was a former high school cheerleader from a middle-class California family, described as smart, attractive, and full of potential. But by 19, she had fallen under the spell of one of the most infamous cult leaders in American history, Charles Manson. On the night of August 10, 1969, Van Houten joined fellow family members Tex Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel in breaking into the Los Angeles home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a quiet couple who ran a local supermarket chain. Just one night earlier, Manson's followers had brutally murdered actress Sharon Tate and 4 others. Now, Manson wanted more chaos, more blood, and more terror. He chose the LaBiancas at random, believing their deaths would help spark his apocalyptic race war, which he called Helter Skelter. Inside the home, the scene turned nightmarish. Leno LaBianca was tied up in the living room, Rosemary was dragged into the bedroom, and Leslie, just a teenager, was handed a knife. She stabbed Rosemary LaBianca at least 14 times. Later, she tried to claim that Rosemary was already dead when she plunged the blade into her body. The autopsy told another story. Rosemary was still alive. The murders were frenzied, ritualistic, and utterly senseless. In the weeks that followed, Van Houten and the other Manson girls appeared in courtrooms smiling, singing, and carving X's into their foreheads to show loyalty to their leader. To the public, the sight was horrifying. Young women who looked like ordinary daughters and sisters behaving like brainwashed soldiers in a cult of death. By 1971, Leslie Van Houten was convicted of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was originally sentenced to death, but when California struck down the death penalty in 1972, her sentence was commuted to life in prison. Over the decades, Van Houten's life behind bars followed a path far different from her youth. She earned a college degree, became a mentor to other inmates, and took part in extensive therapy. At parole hearings, she admitted her guilt without excuses. "I was weak. I was a coward. I allowed myself to be manipulated, and people died because of it." Still, year after year, California governors denied her parole. Their message was always the same. The crime was too brutal, too infamous, too unforgivable. For more than half a century, she remained incarcerated, a living reminder of the night the Manson family brought terror to Los Angeles. But then came July 11th, 2023. After 53 years behind bars, Leslie Van Houten walked out of prison on parole, making her the first Manson family member ever released. Today, she is in her 70s, living quietly in transitional housing under strict supervision. Her hair is gray, her face lined by time. To some, she looks like an ordinary grandmother, but for the families of the victims, time has not erased the horror. Deborah Tate, the sister of Sharon Tate, said it plainly. "She may look like a grandmother now, but I still see the girl with the knife." That is the question that lingers over her story. Can someone who committed atrocities at 19 ever truly be forgiven at 73? Some argue that rehabilitation and remorse should matter. Others believe certain crimes are so monstrous that no amount of time can undo them. Leslie Van Houten went from a cheerleader with a future to a killer in a cult, and though she now walks free, her name will forever be bound to one of America's darkest chapters. Monica Sementilli. On January 23, 2017, a brutal discovery was made in a quiet Woodland Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles. Fabio Sementilli, a 49-year-old celebrity hairstylist known for his warm personality and high-profile career, was found bleeding to death on the back patio of his home. He had been stabbed multiple times and his throat was slashed. The attack was savage, leaving little doubt that this was no random crime. Fabio was more than a stylist. He had worked with Hollywood's elite, competed internationally, and mentored countless young professionals in the beauty industry. To friends and colleagues, he was generous, charismatic, and devoted to his family. To his wife of decades, Monica Sementilli, he was a loyal partner. But as investigators would soon discover, the greatest threat to Fabio's life had been living under his own roof. At first, police suspected a burglary gone wrong. The scene had been staged to suggest intruders, but experienced detectives immediately spotted inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry, and strangely, the home security footage had been deliberately erased. The deeper investigators looked, the clearer it became. This was a targeted killing. The breakthrough came when evidence tied Monica to a disturbing double life. On the surface, she appeared to be a respectable suburban mother and devoted wife. Behind the scenes, she was carrying on an affair with Robert Baker, a former adult film actor with a violent past. Prosecutors later revealed that Monica and Baker had been planning Fabio's murder for months, motivated by a $1.6 million life insurance policy that Monica stood to collect. On the day of the crime, Monica allegedly left the patio door unlocked. Baker didn't come alone. He brought an accomplice, Michael Joseph Anthony, to help carry out the attack. Together, they ambushed Fabio as he relaxed outside. He never stood a chance. After the killing, Monica called 911, pretending to be the devastated wife who had just discovered her husband's body. To neighbors and family, she played the part convincingly. But investigators were already connecting the dots. DNA evidence, cell phone records, and deleted surveillance footage pointed directly to Monica and her lover. Text messages revealed planning, coordination, and intimacy that shattered her facade of innocence. The case cracked open further when Michael Anthony agreed to cooperate with law enforcement, giving detailed accounts of the murder plot and Monica's central role in it. In the courtroom, Prosecutors painted a chilling picture. A woman who betrayed the man who had built her a life of comfort, conspiring with another man to cash in on his death. They described the crime as cold, calculated, and fueled by greed and lust. Even her daughter, Isabella, stood before the court in anguish, telling the conspirators, "You ruined our lives." But Monica sat stone-faced, showing little emotion as the evidence piled up against her. Robert Baker accepted a plea deal in 2023 and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Michael Anthony also received a life term. And in April 2025, after a 10-week trial, a jury convicted Monica Sementilli of first-degree murder with special circumstances and conspiracy to commit murder. She now faces life in prison with no chance of parole at her sentencing, set for June 2025. For Fabio's family and the many who admired him in the beauty industry, justice brought some closure, but not healing. Fabio had built something beautiful, a career of artistry, a reputation for kindness, and a home filled with love. In the end, the person he trusted most, his own wife, was the one who plotted his death. From luxury homes and glamorous events to the cold walls of a prison cell, Monica Sementilli's downfall is not just the story of a crime. It is the story of ultimate betrayal, proving once again that wealth and appearances can hide the darkest intentions. 5. Kristin Rossum. On November 6, 2000, San Diego police responded to a call from a frantic young woman reporting that her husband wasn't breathing. When officers arrived at the couple's apartment, they found Greg DeVillers, 26 years old, lying motionless in bed. The scene was eerily staged. Red rose petals had been carefully scattered across his body, as if to suggest a tragic love story. To the untrained eye, it looked like suicide. To investigators, it looked suspicious from the start. The woman making that call was Kristin Rossum, just 24 years old, a toxicologist employed at the San Diego County Medical Examiner's office. Bright, ambitious, and outwardly successful, she seemed to have everything going for her. A promising career, financial stability, and a devoted husband. But beneath the surface, her life was unraveling. Rossum had relapsed into drug use, secretly abusing methamphetamine, and she was carrying on an affair with her married supervisor, Dr. Michael Robertson. When Greg discovered both the affair and her drug problem, he threatened to expose her. He told her she needed to end the relationship, quit the drugs, or face the consequences, losing her job, her reputation, and perhaps her freedom. To Kristin, that wasn't an option. Rather than risk her secret life coming to light, she chose murder. As a trained toxicologist, Rossum knew the power of drugs and poisons better than anyone. She had access to substances that most people would never see, including fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so powerful that just a tiny amount can kill. According to prosecutors, Rossum stole fentanyl from her workplace and combined it with sedatives such as clonazepam and oxycodone. She administered the cocktail to her husband while he lay in bed. The rose petals? They were her attempt to stage the death as a symbolic suicide, inspired by the film American Beauty, which had been released just a year earlier. But investigators quickly unraveled her deception. They found a needle mark on Greg's body that could not be explained by natural causes. They discovered that fentanyl vials were missing from Rossum's lab. And the most damning piece of evidence was a receipt showing she had purchased a single red rose on the very day Greg died. Proof that the petals scattered around him weren't spontaneous, but part of a deliberate cover-up. During her trial in 2002, Rossum's defense argued that Greg had taken his own life. But the toxicology reports told a different story. The levels of fentanyl in his system were lethal, and the drug combinations were inconsistent with suicide. They were, however, perfectly consistent with a calculated poisoning by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The jury didn't need long to decide. Rossum was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances. Murder by poison. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She is currently serving her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, the largest women's prison in the United States. The case became known nationwide as the American Beauty murder, a chilling reminder that appearances can deceive. To the outside world, Kristin Rossum was the picture of success, intelligent, beautiful, and married to a loving husband. But beneath that facade was addiction, betrayal, and ultimately a killer who used her scientific knowledge to commit the unthinkable. For Greg's family, justice came, but at a price that could never be repaid. He had been only 26 years old, with his entire life ahead of him. He trusted his wife completely. Instead of honesty, he was met with poison. Instead of love, he was met with murder. Kristin Rossum once walked the halls of a medical office dedicated to uncovering the truth about suspicious deaths. Today, she walks the yard of a prison, forever remembered not for her intelligence or ambition, but for a single, horrific act that turned her into one of California's most infamous female killers. Number 6. Angelina Rodriguez. In September 2000, the quiet Los Angeles suburb of Montebello was shaken by the sudden death of a 41-year-old special education teacher named Jose Francisco Frank Rodriguez. He had been married for just 4 months to a woman who seemed devoted and caring, Angelina Rodriguez. To the outside world, his collapse looked like a tragic medical emergency. He had no visible injuries, no history of serious illness, and there was no sign of a struggle. But investigators soon discovered his death was anything but natural. In the days after his funeral, suspicions grew. Angelina began asking about Frank's $250,000 life insurance policy, which she had convinced him to take out not long before he died. The timing was unsettling. Why was a new bride so eager to collect money while her husband's death remained unexplained? A more thorough autopsy revealed the truth. Frank had been poisoned. Toxicology tests showed traces of ethylene glycol, the deadly chemical found in antifreeze, as well as evidence of oleander, a poisonous plant. It wasn't just one dose. It appeared Frank had been systematically poisoned over time, his food and drinks laced with toxins until his body could no longer fight back. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered chilling details. Angelina had allegedly tried multiple times to kill Frank before resorting to poison. At one point, she tampered with gas lines in their garage, apparently hoping to cause an explosion. When that failed, she turned to more subtle, calculated methods. Her motive was clear: financial gain. The case grew darker when investigators looked into her past. In 1993, 7 years before Frank's death, Angelina's 13-month-old daughter, Alicia, died under suspicious circumstances. The official report listed the death as an accident involving a pacifier, but insurance records showed Angelina collected money afterward. Now, with Frank's death, a pattern emerged: tragedy followed by financial benefit. At trial, prosecutors described Angelina as manipulative and cold. Witnesses testified that she had even tried to frame others to deflect suspicion from herself. The defense argued there wasn't enough evidence to prove she had caused Frank's death, but the jury was unconvinced. The combination of forensic science, financial motive, and her disturbing history painted a devastating picture. In 2004, Angelina Rodriguez was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances: murder for financial gain and murder by poison. The judge handed down the harshest possible sentence: death. In court, the judge remarked, "In over 20 years, I have never seen a colder heart." For years, she sat on California's death row, one of the few women in the state facing execution. But the legal system moves slowly in capital cases. Appeals dragged on for decades, and in 2024, her sentence was reduced to life without the possibility of parole after procedural challenges to her trial. Still, she remains incarcerated at the Central California Women's Facility, sharing the same prison as other notorious women like Kristin Rossum. For Frank's family, the outcome is a bitter mix of justice and loss. He had been a beloved teacher, remembered for his kindness and dedication to his students. He thought he had found happiness in a new marriage, only to be betrayed by the person he trusted most. The story of Angelina Rodriguez is one of chilling betrayal, a woman who married for love on the outside, but plotted for money in the shadows. From suburban comfort and newlywed photos to a prison cell for life, her case stands as a reminder that some of the deadliest poisons come not from chemicals alone, but from greed. 7. Kelsey Turner. In 2019, the name Kelsey Turner was better known for magazine covers than courtroom headlines. A former Playboy Italia and Maxim model, her Instagram page was filled with luxury cars, designer outfits, and glamorous vacations. She lived in upscale apartments, posted selfies from expensive restaurants, and presented herself as a woman whose beauty had opened every door. But beneath the images, there was no real wealth of her own. The lifestyle she flaunted was being bankrolled by a much older man, a California psychiatrist named Dr. Thomas Burchard. Burchard was 71 years old, a respected physician who had spent decades helping patients. Over time, he poured more than $300,000 into supporting Turner. He paid her rent, bought her cars, covered her bills, and gave her cash when she needed it. To him, the relationship seemed like mentorship and companionship. He believed he was helping her build a better life. Turner, however, saw him as her safety net, and when he threatened to take that away, the arrangement turned deadly. On March 1, 2019, Dr. Burchard traveled from California to Las Vegas, where Turner was living with her boyfriend John Logan Kennison and their roommate Diana Pena. He confronted her over forged checks and missing money, telling her he was done funding her lifestyle. That confrontation would be the last time anyone saw him alive. 1 week later, his body was discovered in the trunk of Turner's blue Mercedes-Benz, abandoned near Lake Mead in the Nevada desert. Wrapped in blankets, his body told the story of a violent end. He had been bludgeoned to death with a baseball bat, his head crushed, his face unrecognizable. Investigators quickly turned their attention to Turner's home. Inside, they found bloodstains, broken furniture, cleaning supplies, and towels that matched those used to wrap Burchard's body. The cover-up had been sloppy, but the motive was clear. Turner's luxurious lifestyle was about to end, and she couldn't let that happen. The most chilling testimony came from Diana Pena, who agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. She described how Turner exploded when Burchard announced he was cutting her off. Pena said Kennison attacked the elderly doctor with a baseball bat while Turner stood by. Instead of calling 911 or trying to stop the attack, Turner allegedly ordered Pena to help clean the scene and move the body. Together, they stuffed him into the trunk of Turner's car and abandoned it in the desert. The case moved swiftly through the courts. Kennison confessed and received a sentence of 18 to 45 years in prison. Pena, who cooperated, was given probation. Turner, however, fought the charges. In 2022, she entered what is known as an Alford plea to second-degree murder, a legal maneuver that allowed her to maintain her innocence while acknowledging prosecutors had enough evidence to convict her. The court sentenced Kelsey Turner to 10 to 25 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole in 2029, though the brutality of the crime may weigh heavily against her. Today, she sits in a Nevada state prison, a far cry from the luxury apartments and photo shoots that once defined her life. For the family of Dr. Burchard, the trial was a painful reminder of how trust can be exploited. He was a man who dedicated his life to helping others, only to be killed by someone he thought he was helping most of all. Kelsey Turner's story is a haunting example of appearances versus reality. Behind the filtered images and glamorous poses was desperation, greed, and a willingness to let an elderly benefactor be beaten to death rather than lose financial support. From magazine spreads to a prison jumpsuit, her fall is as steep as it is tragic. They were women who lived in privilege. Mansions, luxury cars, prestigious careers, glamorous events. To the outside world, they had everything. Yet one by one, they made choices that destroyed lives and stripped away the illusion of untouchability. Rebecca Grossman, a philanthropist who thought speeding through a crosswalk wouldn't have consequences. Amy Preasmyer, a pregnant teenager who chose murder over responsibility. Leslie Van Houten, a cheerleader who let a cult turn her into a killer. Monica Sementilli, a wife who traded her husband's love for a life insurance payout. Kristin Rossum, a toxicologist who turned her scientific knowledge into a deadly weapon. Angelina Rodriguez, a widow who poisoned for profit. And Kelsey Turner, a model who chose greed over the life of the man funding her lifestyle. Each story is a fall from grace, from mansions to prison cells, from admiration to infamy. But beyond the headlines and courtroom drama lies the real tragedy. The victims who will never come home. The families left with empty chairs at dinner tables, the children forced to grow up without parents, and the loved ones who still carry scars that no sentence can heal. These cases are not just about the women who committed them. They are about the people they betrayed. Husbands, boyfriends, children, parents, and entire communities who trusted them. Trust is the thread that binds all of these stories, and in every case, it was shredded by lies, manipulation, and selfishness. We often think wealth protects people, that status can shield them from the harshest consequences. But in the end, the mansions, the reputations, and the privileges could not save them. The law reached them all, and today their lives are measured not in luxuries, but in prison counts, parole hearings, and years behind bars. As you reflect on these stories, one question remains. Which case shocked you the most? Was it the socialite who killed 2 children in a crosswalk, the toxicologist who staged her husband's death with rose petals, or the model who let an elderly doctor be beaten to death rather than lose her lifestyle? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who cares about the truth, and subscribe so you never miss the stories that must be told. This isn't entertainment, it's reality. And remembering the victims, speaking their names, and ensuring their stories live on is the least we can do.